right, we're going to do a roll call. Present. Mr. Bruno.
Here.
Ms. Capiello.
Here.
Ms. Higley.
Here.
Ms. Lavin. Mr. Messinger.
Here.
Mr. Moses.
Here.
Mr. Parisi.
Here.
Mr. Asatola.
Here.
Okay, we do have a quorum.
Opening of the meeting announcement, adequate notice of meeting pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Laws of 1975. This meeting notice was sent to the Asbury Park Press on August 31st, 2020, and has been duly advertised in the Asbury Park Press. Issue September 3rd, 2020. All municipal clerks of the townships and boroughs within the regional high school district have been duly notified, and the requirements of posting of notices have been met on August 31st, 2020. At this point, I ask everyone to stand for the pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this point, we're going to do interviews, and I think there's only one at this juncture for board member vacancy, and I would like Mr. Toscano to take over. Yeah, I mean,
You understand? Okay, so, I'm sorry, Mr. Rice. Board Secretary's not here tonight, so I do apologize. If you would like to start with an introduction and an opening statement, and then we'll open up the floor to any board members that may have questions.
Good evening, board members, and my name is Adam Weiss. I'm a resident of Mountain.
we hear you well.
Okay, great. I'm a resident of Mountain. I have 3 children, all school age. At this point, they're all in the Mountain School District, but obviously they will be advancing to the school district. During the day, I essentially serve as a board attorney to school boards throughout the state of New Jersey. My firm represents school districts in 19 of New Jersey's 21 counties, the exception being Salem County and Indiana. I live, eat, sleep, and read school board work. Fortunately or unfortunately, that's what it is. I look forward to entertaining any of your questions that you may have for me, and hopefully I have your consideration for the meeting.
So just as a preliminary matter, there were some questions that were submitted just to board members. I have 2, so I'll just ask Mr. Rice if you want to respond directly to the board, and then if there's a follow-up, the board may follow. The first question is, you're going to come to the board as an active member if you are the selected candidate. What background do you have that will help you perform the functions of a board member? Do you have similar administrative experience that can assist the board in the decision-making process?
So, as I alluded to in my opening statement, I am a board attorney. I don't have any private clients. My practice is dedicated entirely to representation of districts throughout the state. So with that, that's such a large umbrella under which everything falls. I think to the extent that, without trying to be humble here, I have a very good idea of what goes on board. I have a very good idea of the financial challenges that the board face as a result of the budget cuts, SQ, and anything else. I have a very good idea of what the board is dealing with regard to COVID, with regard to the ever-changing requirements that were put on the table and changed at different points throughout the past number of months. I deal with that on a daily basis. So I'm very familiar with everything that goes on at the board and all the hard decisions and increasingly hard decisions, lack of a playbook that boards are required to make, especially in these really unforeseen times. I hope that
sleep. I knew I recognized somebody that also was not sleeping. Number two, please tell us if you would have to refrain from voting on any issue that you can think of because of a conflict of interest. For instance, do you have any family members working for Freehold Regionalized Commission?
I do not believe that I have any conflicts of interest that would preclude me from voting on anything with regard to the school district. To my knowledge, I don't have any relatives that work for the board. I don't have any business interests in anything that's related at all to the board. So, in my opinion, I don't believe that I have any conflicts of interest at all that would preclude me from participating fully in the board.
Mr. President, that was the two questions that were submitted by board members in advance. We can open it up at this point to any member individually that may have questions.
Can I start?
Sure, you sir.
Okay. Do you work for the law firm that Mark Tappan works for?
No, I do not.
Okay, you're familiar with him, right?
I believe Mr. Tappan is managing partner at the Leader Law Group.
The leader. Oh, okay, the reason that I asked that is I just didn't want to have any conflicts of interest on my own. I work as a co-consultant to North Bergen Housing Authority with Mr. Cavaghan, and he goes to numerous areas of the law. And with regard to you asking, mentioning about being humble, about 6 months ago I was testifying in federal court, and the United States Attorney, Assistant Attorney, said to me, your knowledge seems very good. How do you rate yourself? And you know, in nationwide. And I said, well, I think I'm the best in the world. And he said, well, don't you think that's an overstatement? And my answer was, well, I am under oath. So I appreciate your candor. Any other,
Mr. Bruno?
Hi, Adam. How you doing? On the topic. So you probably noticed by reading the papers and being the board attorney, our school board and our superintendent, we're not in favor of taking on anybody, especially when it comes to the S2. Sorry. We have taken on a school board with our superintendent direction the S2. Any politician that we have to deal with S2 over the last year and a half. I'm sure your school boards have to do the same thing. Do you have any problem with that? Being on the school board, I mean, you only want to vote, but being on the school board that is known for taking on the S2. So
thank you for your question. To answer that, I have no problem whatsoever in advocating whatever is best for the residents, students, and stakeholders of the Freehold Regional High School District. If that requires me to make a vote that may not be popular, so be it. But I have no qualms about being the devil's advocate for the children, the residents, taxpayers, and stakeholders of the Freehold Regional High School District.
thank you.
Ms. Cabio, Mr. Hemplos, I'm sorry.
I know I look like it.
No, I couldn't see the hand. I saw it.
I had my hair cut. Hey, Adam, Fishy Moses, Freehold Borough Rep. I just have two questions. One, how long have you been living in the town of Manal?
Okay, so I'll answer that one first. I've been a resident of Manalapan since March of 2016, but my roots in Manalapan go back to my great-grandparents about 103 years ago. They had a farm in Manalapan, and since then I have an aunt and uncle that live in Manalapan General Store out on 33. I have cousins and relatives that live in Manalapan, so I'm firmly planted.
My second question, this might not have anything to do with the board, but in there. Where did you go to law school, and what made you want to go into part of law that deals with law?
Sure. Good question. I went to law school at Freehold Law School. I'll give you my educational background. Rutgers University undergraduate with a degree in art history. From there, I went to American University in Washington, D.C., and I have a degree in public communications master's. From there, I worked for about 9 or so years I was in corporate commercial real estate. The company that I worked for filed for bankruptcy, and my middle management level was eliminated. And as a result, I thought that was the best time for me to make a change. So I went to law school when I was 30 years old. As a full-time student, probably the oldest one in the day. From there, I worked for Ryan in Middlesex County Superior Court. And from there, I wound up with a pretty large regional insurance defense law firm where I focused solely on representation of school districts, police departments, and fire departments for people. And then from there, kind of one of us fell in line, and that's really all I know at this point.
You know, there was just one other thing. You said you listed most of the counties in New Jersey represent. Which ones in Monmouth County do you represent?
In Monmouth County, we have the Special Education Council to the Mountain Regional School District, Hazlitt, Long Branch, Legal Special Ed Council, Unfortunately, for Edward Park School District. I'm sure there are others that I can't think. Roosevelt School District, Madeline, Aberdeen, I believe, Henry Hudson Regional School District. I'm sure I'm forgetting a couple, but I think that's a nice sample for you.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Well, I have a question.
Mr. Messi.
Diana can go. Diana.
Did you?
Oh, okay. I'm Michael Messenger from Marlboro, and you're a very accomplished candidate. We're lucky to have you. And my question is, because you're so accomplished both professionally within the education field in the state, and your firm is very big, and it's kind of politically involved in various circles in the state. My issue is, we sit here. Probably going to insult Pesci and Carl and myself by calling us. We're just Joe Schmoes here, and we have 3 elected representatives who represent parts of this district that voted to cut $30 million from our budget, okay? So we vented and can't believe how any elected official could do this to his own constituents. I just wanted to, and Carl had a meeting with the state senator, and there was some lip service paid to this district, but we're still in the same situation with our funding drastically cut. Based upon your different circumstance versus other members of this board who vent, I mean, looking at it, what do you think you could possibly do to really add some pressure on the elected officials who voted to cut our funding, but represent parts of this district that Dr. Sampson can't do that, Mr. Astapola can't do that. None of us could do. You're in a different situation. What, if anything, you may not be able to do anything, but I think you're in a different place in life than anyone else on this board. And I don't know if you give this much thought as a resident, and the budget cuts will, of course, impact your own children. Just wanted your thoughts on that.
Sure. So, as a board member, for all of you know, a single board member is not a board member. A board member is, I don't want to knock you, but a board member is powerless. It doesn't have any influence. It's the board. It's all of the board members together that come together and function as a board. So to look to any one individual for the what can you do to help us, I view it as really a collective. And in fact, it would probably be a violation of the code of ethics of the board member if I were to take any personal action that would want to do. So with regard to what can I offer, I can offer to the board in conjunction with the board as a single member of the board. I can offer ideas and insights, but I don't know that I would or could, I should say, take any action on my own to try and get the board any sort of benefit. It's really the board members that have to come together and collectively as the board decide what's beneficial and chart a path moving forward and trying to achieve that goal. So I hope that I
Capiello, question before?
No questions at this time.
Mark, I have one question.
Mr. Parisi.
Hi, welcome. Thank you for submitting a letter of interest. I'm Mark Parisi from Powell. My question for you, it was going to be a question I was going to ask all three of the candidates, but since you're the only one that's here, similar to before Dr. Conclusion, that you'll likely get this nomination. But I was going to ask the other candidates this, and I felt that it was appropriate to ask you, even though you're the only candidate. Have you had any past or present relationship with any board members here tonight, or any administration? Do you have any relationship with anybody in the administration?
I'll tell you this. I met Dr. Sampson about 5 years ago in Atlantic City. I believe it was Sandy. I don't know if you remember that, but I did. Mr. Toscano, I think probably 10 years ago or more, I think I was with Mr. Toscano at the Atlantic City Board of Education when there was he probably rather forget that. I didn't, but I did, personally work with him for a short bit when I was insurance counsel on the Atlantic. Do I have friends that work in the district? Yes, I have friends that work in the district, but I don't think that I would put my law license on the line or risk any sort of ethics act violation in order to benefit anyone. Because at the end of the day, I have to lay my head down at night and rest comfortably on my pillow, not thinking about or second guessing things that I may have done. And that's why, while it may make some people upset with me, that's how I choose to carry myself, because at the end of the day, verification is all we have. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. President, doesn't seem to be any other questions. Joyce, any concluding remarks? Anything else you wanted to add?
I hope that I was able to answer your question. I respectfully request your consideration tonight, and to the extent that I'm lucky enough to get an appointment, I look forward to working with you very much. Thank you.
So at this point, what the board will do is the board is going to go into executive session to discuss not only your candidacy and deliberate, but also to all the other items that are listed on the agenda itself. You're certainly welcome, sir, if you wanted to stay for the public portion, which we will come back at 8 o'clock at the end of our normal executive session.
Sure. Okay.
Mr. Asatola, what we'll need is just a motion to go into executive session.
Okay, before I do that, Mr. Weiss, thank you very much for coming out here. I appreciate it so much. And can I have a motion then to go into executive session? Motion.
Second.
Mr. Bruno, Mr. Parisi.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Board will return at 8 o'clock.
Okay, we're going to resume the meeting, and we just came out of executive session, a little out of order than usual tonight. So let's start with Mr. Toscano. Are there any changes to the executive agenda you wish to know?
The only changes to the agenda as to what appears in public is that the board did not discuss harassment, intimidation, and bullying report as it appeared on the agenda tonight. And the only additional item was the board did discuss legal issues related to reopening and staff and student health issues. On that, Mr. Asatola, that was all.
Thank you, Mr. Toscano. Now we have a resolution appointing new board member. Mr. Toscano, will you read the resolution to be added to the agenda?
Be it resolved by the Freehold Regional High School District to appoint Adam Weiss to serve as the Manalapan representative.
I think that will be
We can do it now.
resolution B4.
We could actually do it as a standalone resolution.
Okay, so let's hold it as a standalone resolution, and can I have a motion to approve that standalone resolution?
Motion.
Mr. Bruno, second. Capiello?
The same.
Oh, Ms. Higley, I'm sorry.
Any discussion?
And I just would note, I should note it in the resolution itself, it just obviously would be pending criminal history background check and fingerprint, which is required by the state.
Okay. That ends discussion, and I'd like to have a roll call, and since Sean Boyce, our secretary, is absent tonight, would you take care of that for us, Mrs. Toscano?
Yes. Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Ms. Capiello?
Yes.
Ms. Higley?
Yes.
Mr. Messinger?
Yes.
Mr. Moses?
Yes.
Mr. Parisi?
Yes.
Mr. Asatola?
Yes.
Motion's approved.
Motion approved. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Mr. White. Mr. White, I just want to introduce our new Manalapan board rep, and thank you for volunteering for this position.
Thank you. I look forward to working with all of you.
Okay, meeting minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of August 24th regular meeting?
Capiello? Second. Mr. Parisi?
Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Ms. Capiello?
Yes.
Mrs. Higley?
Yes.
Mr. Messinger?
Yes.
Mr. Moses?
Yes.
Mr. Parisi?
Yes.
Mr. Asatola?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Communications. Communications are on file in the office of the board secretary. Now we come to what I say is an incredibly important part of the meeting, the superintendent's report. I'll yield the floor to Mr. Sampson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Hesitola. So I'll get into my report in a moment, but just obviously this was the first day of the start to the official school year for the Freehold Regional High School District, and so obviously we're remote until October 19th at this point in time. Classes began in earnest today. Students are following the remote schedule, which is basically 5 50-minute periods of live instruction. Had approximately 70% of the faculty and staff in the buildings today instructing. A number of significant positive feedback from the community, obviously very different than what it would look like in the spring. It's much more synchronous. For the update for where we stand, the district did not sign the Department of Education waiver asking us, stating that we could not meet health and safety standards. We did say that we had staffing concerns at this point in time as a high school district, a standalone high school district. Obviously, we have a number of specialized positions in this school district. Our goal at this point in time is to make sure that we can deliver the best instructional program for our students without staff here as a result of some of the processes in terms of other districts going remote and forcing sudden child care issues upon a number of our faculty members, as well as some medical concerns. This district elected to go remote until October 19th. At this point in time, we are staffing our building as appropriate, asking for finalization of any leave requests by September 21st, and our full steam ahead to open on October 19th. Obviously, Mr. Boyce is not here this evening. I believe this is the first board meeting he's missed in 12 years, and so my thoughts are with him and his family at this point in time, family emergency there. But one of the things that we wanted to do as a district, so I ended up giving 3 community updates in June, July, and in the beginning of August, and went through some of the work that a lot of the work that we've done in the district as it relates to health and safety. And in particular, there's an awful lot of noise out there about ventilation systems, MERV 13 filters, what is or is not appropriate, and I want to be clear to the public that the Freehold Regional High School District went remote for staffing reasons, not for any health or safety reasons. And so one of the things that sets this district apart from other districts is some of the unique partnerships that we have. And I want to highlight one of those partnerships today because I think that it's important from a public understanding from the larger school community with our students, and as well as our faculty and staff who will be returning to our buildings come October 19th. And so we wanted to talk about some of the work that's gone into our HVAC system and some of the things that we've done to ensure not just adequate ventilation, but I would argue exceptional ventilation across the school district. And so just a little brief history lesson. In 2012 and 2014, the Freehold Regional High School District was one of the first districts in the state to engage in what is known as an ESIP program, an Energy Savings Improvement Plan. What we were able to do at that point in time was approximately $20 million in HVAC upgrades, which we bonded internally at no cost to the taxpayer. So we upgraded a number of our systems at that point in time through that program. That's borne fruit presently with the circumstance that we find ourselves in, obviously, with the COVID-19 pandemic. About 2 years ago, a little bit less, we partnered with a company known as Synergistics, energy saving specialists who have partnered, and we have Bob Romano here, who's our on booth. Bob, just put your hand up so folks know who you are. Thank you. Bob is our boots on the ground who works in the district managing our controls and our systems and what that looks like. But we also have Matt Steller, who's a client manager. Matt, if you could just raise your hand. And we have Mike Hillenbrand, who's a field consultant from Synergistics here. And obviously, Pat LaGravenis is director of B&G. And then we have Ralph Coppola, who is an industrial hygienist, who's also here. Because what I want them to do publicly tonight is talk about some of the work that we've done in the district. And so I'll give you there's a lot of misconceptions out there. We are wholly confident in the exceptionalism of what we've done to make sure that we have a safe environment for when we return on October 19th. And Mike and Matt, if maybe we can start with you. If you can come up and just give an overview of Synergistics and an overview of some of the work we've done here. And then Mike, if you can get into some of the nitty gritty about the ventilation. And what I'd ask the board, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them as these gentlemen move through the conversation.
Sure, thank you all for having us here tonight. As the superintendent said, Synergistic is an energy conservation company. However, we've always been founded on the belief that we can't cut energy costs while reducing the comfort or the safety in spaces for learning environments. It does us no good to help cut costs on a utility budget if we're making people uncomfortable or if we're causing health risks to the building or to the occupants in it. So one of the core missions, obviously, is energy conservation. But as an engineering and data-driven company, we really need to strive to ensure that the work we do, bringing buildings, recommissioning buildings, and bringing them back to design is developing sustainable solutions for your buildings in the long term. As we do that, and as we look through the COVID pandemic nationally, we're a national organization, we have a lot of experience in the K-12 market as well as colleges and universities. And what we've been able to do during that time, specifically here in Freehold, was reduce energy consumption from March through July of over 60% roughly. So that helps mitigate some of the costs, initially with what you're dealing with right now and going forward with budget constraints, that every school district is dealing with across the country. But what that shows is that 60% reduction that you all achieved nationally, most of your peers only reduced 13 to 20%. So why I give you that number is that it just helps elaborate the experience that we have on the engineering and the technical side to be able to accomplish that. And by doing that, we have a partnership here that started in September of 2018. And over that time, we've been able to dive into the systems, work with Pat and work with Sean and his team to be able to do assessments on your equipment, figure out correct sequence of operations, and optimize what's happening in your district. And during this whole pandemic experience, the ability of our company, I think, to pivot towards this national pandemic is really important. We've taken energy conservation and put it in the back seat. It's not the most important thing for us right now. The most important thing for our clients is getting kids and students and staff back into school in a safe and comfortable environment. And whatever we can do that helps our clients do that is what is top of mind for us as an organization. So certainly energy conservation is always going to be a part of our DNA, but how we do that is going to be incorporated into also how we help keep your building safe and healthy, and the same thing with your occupants. So by focusing on that side, hopefully we're able to help you all open without a hitch, and also also help you mitigate any costs by focusing on unoccupied times and times when the people aren't in the buildings. If we can focus on those areas, we can still mitigate costs while ensuring that while people are in the buildings, we are mitigating the risk and the spread of COVID-19 as much as we can, as much as possible.
Can you give me an example of one particular thing that you do during the peak time when the kids, or now the teachers are in the building, but is there an example you can give us?
Sure. So we have certain guidelines that we would normally have. There's things that like demand load management for CO2 that these systems are across the country where if occupancy drops, then outside air is decreased. Well, our recommendation during this time is to disable that function. So Mike will get into a little bit more of this with what we talk about pre and post occupancy, but our goal is not to impact occupied time. It's to actually increase outside air during occupied time. So Mike will talk a little bit about the ventilation and air exchange topic on that side of it, but those are things that, yes, will save you money, but we're not recommending that you do things like that during this time, if possible. So disabling some of those things. It would have saved you money, but there's money to be saved when people aren't in the building. The focus is on increasing air dilution during occupied time.
Thank you.
The other aspect of what we do is we've distributed a number of white papers from our engineering department. We share these with all of our clients, and they kind of lead the direction in the steps that we take. Those white papers were, some of them were written in conjunction with Barney Burroughs, who was a past president of ASHRAE. So everyone right now has heard of ASHRAE. They're coming out, they're the standards for ventilation around the world. And Barney Burroughs was a former president of theirs. He wrote the book on moisture management, which has always been a part of what we do and how we help mitigate the risk of that. So Barney Burroughs and Jack Bullock, our lead engineer, have written a number of papers that really tie into what the current recommendations are and what we need to do moving forward. So this is a fluid environment. I mean, some of the recommendations that were being made back in March have changed, right? So some of them were just kind of geared towards hospital-centric areas. They kind of separated things out to more learning environments and other breaking out other building types. So what our goal is that as soon as anything changes or any more recommendations come down, then we try to assess what's happening in the industry and then distribute that to our clients so that they're kept abreast of the most up-to-date information and industry-wide standards and strategies.
So we are in 48 states, and we're a national company. And one of the things I did notice when I first came into here is that DSIP that you guys did do did something that most other school districts around the country don't do. What they did is they put ERBs in 90% of your classrooms. And what an ERB is, it actually brings that outside air into the space and changes over the air. That's a big thing right now, because what we want to try and do is we want to try and change that 3 times before anybody walks into the space. So one of the recommendations that we have, and what the CDC and actually ASHRAE say, is before somebody comes in, we can do a calculation for how many changeovers it takes. But what the CDC says is if you can get a 2-hour runtime, pre and post, okay, that'll hurt that out there. So the systems that you have right now in your schools, 90% of them actually have that in each of the classrooms individually, and they're changing over that. So running those systems like that is going to help a lot with the changeover.
Mike, can I just want to dive into something right there. So because the public the public runs around and says, oh my gosh, MERV 13s, and so one of the points we've made since June is that in 90% of our 80, 90%, whatever the number is in our classrooms, the question about MERV 13 is moot. because it's actually an external air filtration, correct?
On that side, yeah, you're bringing in that air. Now, the HVAC system that actually heats and cools the space, that's totally separate system. That's where your filtration will come in. Okay, because now what you're doing is, yes, that air is coming into the space and then being exhausted out, okay? But the heating and air conditioning system in there is actually rotating that air in the space. That's where the filters come in. And that MER 13 is a good way of doing that. The problem with those MER 13 across the board is that MER 13 might not work in all systems, okay? Because the systems are designed for a certain MER rating. If you restrict the airflow across the air conditioning coil, okay, what's going to happen is the coil is going to freeze up. You're not going to get any air. So now the space at 90 degrees outside is bringing in 90-degree outside air. We're not able to cool the space. Now the space becomes 90 degrees. Okay, that's not a very comfortable teaching and learning about. Okay, so what we want to try and do is we want to make sure those systems are operating as best they can, changing over that air before people get in. All right, when the students walk in, when the teachers walk in, that air is already changed over 2 hours before that. So it's mitigating all that stuff was in the space, and a post-purge as well. And then the systems go off. Okay.
And I know that the district has been looking at that process. It is important that whenever you do install, MER 13, that you do a review and analysis of the equipment to check the pressure drop. So you want to make sure you check the pressure drop in the equipment when you do put that into filtration in. And again, it's a mitigation risk. I mean, it's you have to make sure that the equipment can be designed as that. Otherwise, the equipment's going to break, and then you have no innovation. So it's just a process that I think when everyone hears MER 13, they just think you can just put them in everywhere and slide them in, and it'll be a solution to all the problems. But it's not quite as simple as just that part.
Yeah, our standard answer has been that we're putting them where they're appropriate in our equipment and where our equipment can handle it. Otherwise, you're actually potentially creating other issues by inserting them, correct?
That's absolutely correct.
Excuse me, I have a question. Mike, I know that I don't know about all the other schools, but I know in one of the high schools in our district, there are some classrooms that don't have any windows whatsoever. Is there a special sensor or whatever in those classrooms that have no windows to make sure that the airflow is greater than the other rooms?
Well, you can do that, but talking with Sean and Pat, I think what you're going to be doing moving forward is those classrooms that don't have windows or don't have that ventilation are going to be off limits. We're not going to be able to use those. Okay, there are pieces of equipment that you can put in there to do that, but some there of course they're an extra expense. That you would have to put in to get those roofs up and running to be safe with people in them. Because if you don't have the ability to open up a window, it's going to be tough to mitigate that air and bring that outside air in.
Okay, thank you.
Mike, could I ask you one question really quickly? I hate to delay this, but I don't think that there's anything more important than the safety of our children and staff. I worked at numerous housing authorities throughout my career, and vendors would come in and suggest that HVAC systems have ultraviolet lights installed to kill viruses. Do you find that to be an effective, or could it be applicable in the school district?
Well, let's put it this way. I'll give you my background because I've been in this business since I was 16 years old. So I started running service, working on HVAC systems when I started the job. Right. UV lighting does work. The problem with UV lighting is you need to maintain it continuously. It's not cheap. Okay, you have lights that need to be cleaned weekly. You have so there's a lot of things that need to be done. If they are not maintained properly, you lose the effectiveness of it. You cannot get rid of that virus, and they're really not effective for a coronavirus like you're looking at here. They'll do other things, but for the type of system that we're doing as a pandemic, it's not really feasible to do that. It's really not. That's my experience.
You see, vendors don't tell you that. They just want to sell a light bulb.
And that's, a lot of times that's one of the things that we've done across the country with the clients that we've worked with. We've asked us to be at the table with them, so they don't get that. You know, we want to give you what you can get, and not be able to, or not have the vendor say, hey, you really need this and it's going to work, and then you find out a year later, well, it didn't do anything that we were looking for. You know, and they don't tell you what you need to do with the systems as you
Mike, just to dovetail on Mr. Moses' point, Pat, I don't know if you could add any color to this. In some of our non-windowed rooms, though, that our AC unit is installed, they are using MERV 13s, correct?
That's correct. You are using the fashion. If they're capable of using the MERV 13,
if they're capable, right? Yeah. I want to make that clear because I don't want folks. I don't want some of my faculty and staff to come into an AC non-window unit and say, you know, Dr. Sampson said we shouldn't be here, because I do know that in some of them we are capable of installing the MERV 13s, and they are fully functional to filter that.
That's correct. For those that do have it, I think he was talking about rooms that didn't have
correct.
anything.
Well, so we have some rooms that have that are enclosed rooms and don't have the AC unit with the MERV 13 capability, and we have some that are.
Right.
So I think that's just, the faculty and staff are certainly going to want to know, and the parents are going to want to know in that room, is this, you know, and I want to be clear to the public that we're not using any room that we can't utilize a MERV 13 with an AC unit if it doesn't have a window.
Absolutely, and our recommendations have been to actually not use windows as ventilation or air dilution, is to let the systems, they're designed for that space and that amount of occupants, and let the system work as designed rather than opening up doors and windows to try to create your own air flow.
Gotcha.
I have a question, if I may. First, I just want to say, Dr. Sampson, thank you for bringing in these professionals to address this issue, to not only address our concerns, the public's concerns, but as we move towards a reopening.
Yeah, thanks, Sean.
Yeah, and Sean, who's not here, Sean Boyce. It's so important for us as a board and as a district that we are open with the community about what we're doing to keep our staff and our students as safe as possible. My question was, you know, we get these beautiful fall days, sometimes in New Jersey, 65, 70, 75 degrees. A lot of, for our classrooms that are windowed, do you have any professional recommendation as far as like keeping windows open? You can get some irritants, some allergens, some stuff like that. If you could just speak about that for a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we do, we look at that, okay, because that is an energy savings, okay? We get those days, and one of the things we actually do for moisture management is looking at when we have lower temperature days and lower relative humidity days, we do kind of what the CDC is saying right now, plus the building, okay? Because what we can do is we can open up the outside air dampers for the systems there, and just pull all the outside air all the outside air into those spaces that need to go in there. Okay? That actually does a couple things. It drops the relative humidity in a space and actually gives you some free cool. Okay? The economizers, what the economizers actually do on your systems, they go off of enthalpy control outside. So if the air is good enough outside and the air is not so good inside, okay, what happens is it says, hey, shut off my reserve air and open up my outside air and bring all the outside air I can get. All right? That's how the economizers work. But what happens with economizers in a pandemic is the economizer is saying, hey, my air is not good outside, okay? I need to keep my outside air damper closed. Now you don't get that changeover of air, okay? What we need is that changeover of air right now. So for the systems that we have here, we're changing the air over all the time. And on the days like that, that's one thing that Bob does. He looks at those days, and if it's a favorable day like that, he'll open up the outside air damper, flush that building 100%, and actually give you some free cool.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And there's certainly, we have experiences with numerous clients around the country, and when vendors or anyone else do come to you with ideas and suggestions, especially in this situation, flow them, through Pat and Sean and Bob, and we will look at that with our engineering group, just to help you all figure out what may be best for your district. We can kind of have a non-biased view. We're not connected to any vendors. With our clients we work with, we just want to give you a practical engineering viewpoint of what the best course of action would be.
Does anybody have any additional questions for Matt and Mike? Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So, and then I want to thank Pat LaGraveness, who's here, and just go through some of the work that he's done. I'll just go through some of that, Pat. So we've committed to every single classroom in this district has a hand sanitizer dispenser. There's a tub of wipes for students to wipe their desks down as they come in, as they exit. There's gloves for those folks to wear them. We're in the process, we've gone on to some other projects because we have until October 19th at this point in time, but all of the bathroom fixtures will be touchless. We've also bought approximately 400 fan units to put in the windows to accelerate the ventilation in the rooms with our recommendations from our experts. And then we work with Pannoni Engineering Firm, who is here is also to review all of our cleaning procedures across the district. And so I think the most important element in all of this for the public is that it's not about what the superintendent says, it's not about what the director of buildings and grounds says, it's not about what the assistant soup says. We bring in external third parties to review our work to make sure that it is up to the highest standards for safety, right? And so we feel very, very confidently in what these buildings will be like on October 19th, and that we will, to the best of our ability, certainly mitigate the spread and or risk of COVID-19. So I thank you, gentlemen, for coming out this evening. And I do want to say, Sean, Mr. Boyce did have a little bit of a town hall style thing set up, and unfortunately that didn't occur this evening. And I want to thank him because he had the foresight to sit down with me several weeks ago and say, it would be great if, you keep referencing this work that's going on in your community updates. It would be great if we actually physically brought some of the folks who are taking part in that work on the back end in to talk about what's happening in the district. So thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Okay. Moving forward. We do not have any board reports this time at this meeting, so we're going to go to public participation if we have any. Mr. Toscano, Mr. Dillon, anybody that's a public participation on the list?
No, there's no one to speak for public participation.
Okay. So then we're going to move on. May I have a motion to approve items G1 through K3?
Motion.
Mr. Bruno?
Second was Scipio.
Okay.
And Mr. Estoli, just would note, just for the record, that there are no amendments or revisions to the agenda tonight.
Yes. Discussion, anyone? And let's have a roll call, Mr. Toscano, for that motion.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Ms. Capiello?
Yes.
Mrs. Higley?
Yes, except for K1, I abstain from Laura Lum, Matt Verdoni, Michael Lazzone, and Holographics.
Mr. Messinger?
Yes.
Mr. Moses?
Yes.
Mr. Parisi?
Yes.
Mr. Asatola?
Yes.
All motions carried.
Okay, moving on to old business. Are there any members wishing to discuss old business? New business? Any members wishing to discuss new business?
Mr. Asatola, I just have one comment that I want to make.
Sure.
We were so busy today was the first day of school. I congratulate our administration for having a very successful first day of school. But I think that we would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge that tomorrow's 9/11, and that's on my mind, and for all the families in our school community that were affected by the events of that day. I just want to extend, that my thoughts and prayers with them, and I think that the rest of the board shares my sentiment. So I just wanted to express that.
Thank you, Mr. Parisi. That was 19 years ago, and I remember Officer Grant, the statute of limitations is up, so forget about what I'm saying. I was going 80 miles an hour down the turnpike trying to get back home, and my Toyota was shaking all over, and thank God my family was okay that time. Okay, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion. Mr. Moses?
Second by whom?
Mr. Parisi.
Mr. Parisi. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Thank you.